All right, we're going to start a little early because we have to finish early. Let's bring up the page. Okay, we're holding page Tesvav. We're holding, sorry, Sif Tesvav. It says, Val derech zeh v'nigel l'zari b'chaim. We're talking about, again, the Rebbe was talking about the Friedrich Rebbe's demand from Chassidim that on the highest level of performance, staying up Thursday night, davening properly, applying Chassidus properly, with the same serious nefesh he had for someone to teach them Aleph Beis. So the Rebbe continues, "V'derech seven negil l'zari b'chaim." Kasha yeshna mishu shnoisin is chayiv avor inin l'zari b'chaim. Lo yitachen shtiyeh b'zeh medita v'akbala. We're talking about when things, for things to happen, it has to be Mesiras Nefesh. It has to be 100%. And therefore, there can't be any limitations. Shakasha meduber oidis limud achsidis. As I nimsa eres da, filu kasha meduber oidis comments alafa. As I any nimsa is nita. It's not possible that you have limitations. That to learn chsidis, you could learn. Comments aleph to teach a child or a spiritual child. Aleph base, that's difficult. He says that's not then you have limitations. You can only perform on a certain level. And if you could only do things on a high level, but when it comes to do the simple things, or seemingly simple things, like teaching someone, a child or a spiritual child, meaning someone doesn't know anything, the basics of Yiddishkeit, so that means that none of your avodah is Mesiras Nefesh, not even your avodah of learning Chassidus. Because everything's about cheshbon, everything's about calculation, evaluation. What's worth it? How much can I do? What can I do? When can I do it? Okay, we're not saying that you're a bad person. What you're doing is according to the Shulchan Aruch. The Torah says these are the calculations. This is the math. You can have a backing. No one's going to give you malchus for that. And sometimes you do have to know when to make the calculation. So if you're not talking about a case of Mesiras Nefesh, we're not talking about someone's spiritual existence is at stake. Okay. But if you're talking about a person who's drowning and you could reach your hand in and teach them a little alphabet, so it has to be done. Not just that it has to be done, it has to be done. You can't offset it or offload it to someone and you say, okay, maybe this person anyways is not learning on the level that I'm learning. So let that person teach them Aleph Beis. What does it mean? The famous idea that if it's a question of Pikuach Nefesh, it has to be done by Gedolim. The greatest person should do it. A person shouldn't say, "Well, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do what seemingly this transgression in order to save someone's life." Let someone someone else do it. Says no, it's mitzvah b'gedolim. Like the famous story of the Alter Rebbe who went and chopped wood. So the Misnagdim asked the Alter Rebbe, I understand that the woman was hungry and she just gave birth and someone had to feed her. But why you? Why couldn't you send a chassid? So he says, mitzvah b'gedolim. The greatest of person has to do it. Lama lo yaseh zeis katos. Then I've asked the question, why? Why is it mitzvah b'gedolim? Why can a smaller person do it? Shetzla yenin Shabbos ein behefla gevaldik. For this person to be machal Shabbos, they're not going to, whatever, they'll get over it. It's not going to torment them that they had to be Machal Shabbos from Mesiras for Pikuach Nefesh. Kolkach. And not only that, like the story in the Alter Rebbe. Okay, a smaller person does it. Here you're going to have someone who does it. It could cause a Chil Hashem, someone who doesn't know the circumstances. With halacha. The Afbekain, and Mer says, Gemara says, no, it doesn't work like that. We're talking about someone's life. Azai mitzvah begadol, and the greater of the person has to do it. She asks Azai skadol dafka, that specifically the most important person should do it. You can't offset it to the lesser of a person. Not to send someone else, an intermediary. Not even to send it. It's surely not to send the simple person. But the most important person in the room is the person who has to do the mitzvah of Pikuach Nefesh. Again, that's why the Alter Rebbe himself went out in the middle of Yom Kippur in his talus to go cut wood for a woman who's a yeladis, a woman who gave birth, who are known to feed her. We see this in the behavior of the Friedrich Rebbe, the Rebbe says, where he put himself on the front line of mitzvah b'gdolim, the one who's the most important person in the room, he has to do it, or she has to do it versus someone else. We find that the Frierdiker Rebbe was on one side, sitting there dealing with trying to publish the most deep ideas of Chassidus, the secrets of Torah. We find that the Frierdiker Rebbe took his own time to write the Lubavitcher Rebbe's Zechronis, the memoirs of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe said he was very wondrous. He didn't understand why would the Frierdiker Rebbe, whose time was so precious, and he was in there trying to organize everything. He's in there trying to write all the Chassidus, that he sat and he wrote his Zechronis, his diaries, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's diaries. Why? Because he's like the Rebbe is going to explain. The diary spoke to certain people. Certain simple people couldn't learn a mimer, couldn't understand. But when he told them a sefer sipurim, a story, a biography of Chabad, a biography of the Frierdiker Rebbe, that caught their attention. So the Frierdiker Rebbe spent time and gathered all the information that it took all the years, all his notes and all the stories he heard, and put it into publication. Why? Because maybe that's going to bring someone closer to Yiddishkeit. And the Rebbe says he was wondering why. What was the Rebbe wondering? The Rebbe says that Mahu ha'inyan shebedavar, was is das farin? What's this idea? Harikol inyan darishman. Everything takes, at the end of the day, if you're going to spend time in publishing the Lubavitcher Rebbe's Zechronis, the Frierdiker Rebbe is going to be taking up time for other things he could have been doing. Tircha v'shsimas leiv. He has to do effort, attention. V'yefshel aseh shnei dvarim v'asachas. No one could do two things at once. B'shasha oisik v'shimas Zechronis, when he's writing his memoirs. He's taking up time where he could be writing a deep idea of Chassidus or something else, possibly, seemingly, maybe more important. And also, he can't do both. If he's going to be writing a mimer, he can't write the Zechronis, the memoirs. And the Rebbe says, obviously, it's clear to the Rebbe. It says it's clear to him that the Frierdiker Rebbe, writing his memoirs, was definitely taking up time from something else, because you can't do two things together. The Frierdiker Rebbe wasn't the Frierdiker Rebbe says, okay, I have nothing to do for an hour, for 2 hours today, I'm going to write my memoirs. Every minute of the Frierdiker Rebbe was calculated. The Frierdiker Rebbe was the one himself who spoke about the idea of Hatzlacha b'zman. A person has to be time sensitive, time conscious, and have success in their time efforts. And here the Frierdiker Rebbe is spending a large amount of time and concentration and focus in writing his memoirs, where the Rebbe said he himself was wondering, as a son-in-law, and a chassid, why would the Frierdiker Rebbe spend his precious time on the memoirs? In the importance of things, the Rebbe seems to be saying, a Maimer Chassidus makes more sense. The Rebbe says there's even a greater question. The question is not just on the writing itself of the memoirs. The question is why send the person yarka? Why send the person vegetables when you can send them a piece of meat? Why write for someone the memoirs when you could send that same person you're trying to write the memoirs for? You could send them a Maimer Chassidus, which is more effective. It's deeper ideas of Chassidus. The half hour. B'mokim likroy es zechronis. Maybe the Rebbe was wondering, better for the person who the Frierdiker Rebbe is writing the zechronis for, the memoirs for. Better for that person to spend that half hour that he or she would read the zechronis and learn a Maimer Chassidus, Yom Maimer Chassidus. B'meini maybe blushing kodesh, and the person would say, 1 second, Frierdiker Rebbe wrote the Lubavitcher Rebbe memoirs in Yiddish. Here the Frierdiker Rebbe's memoir were written in Lashon HaKodesh. So if the person doesn't understand Lashon HaKodesh, so you can't learn a Maimer. The Rebbe says, send the Maimer in Yiddish. The time the Frierdiker Rebbe was writing Sefer Zechronis, he already started to publish certain easier to understand Hasidic discourses in Yiddish for the common people to understand. We have the Lubavitcher Rebbe's memoir in Yiddish. And if it's too difficult for the person to study even a Maimer in Yiddish, so there's other publications that have been published. Maybe not in the Frierdiker Rebbe, but other things that were published to simplify. But better, why should the person invest their time? Every person has a certain amount of time. So not just the writer, but the reader. And if the Frierdiker Rebbe is trying to impress on the reader that the reader should read content of quality, seemingly the quality of the content of a Chassidish Maimer, even if it's what we'd call a Maimer Kal, like B'kir Chivrim, is still seemingly a higher level of content than say to write than to read the Lubavitcher memoirs, which seems to be just a storybook. Okay, the Rebbe says if you want to have a logical conversation about this subject, did it make sense for the previous Rebbe to write his memoirs, but he could have spent time on writing, publishing, or pushing, promoting the Chassidus. So you want to have a logical conversation? We can't have a logical conversation about this. Amnam, when are we talking about that we have to have a logical conversation? That's when you want to have a calm conversation about the theory. What would in theory be better for a person to study a mimer, for a person to study their memoirs, for the Frierdiker Rebbe to write a mimer, to write the memoirs? That's all in a conversation, a coffee table conversation. And we're not talking about a person now who's drowning. When a person's drowning, you don't have a coffee table conversation. You throw anything you can to save that person from drowning. When you're not paying attention, that this person who you're writing it for, that we're talking about, is actually drowning now as we speak, in amaratis, in the sea of ignoramus. If you're standing there, you see the Jews drowning in simplicity, in lack of knowledge, and lack of inspiration. Even if you're not sure if the person's drowning. How could you start saying, 1 second, what should I send that person? Maybe I should send a mimer, maybe I should write a mimer. First thing is you got to get the person out of the river of ignorance. If you can't use a mimer, that's not going to pull the person out, that's not going to be the life floaty, to pull that person out of the water of ignorance and lack of care. Is Yasa Zay they Mamar Benigla, say something in Nigla, Yemeni Echlai they Mamar Benigla, so they pass a Chumash jargon, say something in idea that the person understands in their own jargon. Im Gamzel Yazer, I love the Mashasayu, then pull her out, then pull that person out through a story. Maybe a story will grab that person's attention. I they super meises shitaychana, I yitin like menuach esvetim akbrin. The story itself, the lesson of the story, whether the person realizes it or doesn't realize it, will bring the person to a level of connection. The story sometimes inspires, but when a person's drowning, you're not saying, okay, let me find the best quality floating. Grab whatever you think is available at the time. When the previous Rebbe saw that there was those who he couldn't be influenced, he knew the fact is that a Maimer Chassidus is not going to work. They're not going to want to read it. To tell them an idea, a deep idea, nigla in Talmudic studies, that's also not going to grab their attention. And to give them a nice word in the Chumash, that's also not going to work. So he said, you know what he's going to write? His memoirs. The memoirs will catch people's attentions, the stories. The previous Rebbe saw, it could be one Jew, Shnei Yehudim, 2 Jews, Asar Yehudim, 10 Jews, Mei Yehudim, 100 Jews, and you can imagine you could take 1 Jew and inspire them with the Lubavitcher Rebbe's Zechronis, with the memoirs, 2 Jews, 100 Jews. How many people are going to be in the ripple effect of taking a husband and wife and bringing them into Torah Yiddishkeit, bringing a man into Yiddishkeit, a woman into Yiddishkeit, through whatever you can. They build a family, they have children, they have grandchildren. The ripple effect of just inspiring someone. And if you're going to need to use the Lubavitcher Rebbe's memoirs to do it, that's also good. So you can't do the base of shum inyan shenichta b'jargon. I feel b'safa medina. These are, you can have people that will not bring one thing into their house if it's not interesting. They're not interested in speeches and ideas and theories. That's not going to bring them or their animalistic soul to have any kind of interest in what you're talking about. So how could you sometimes have to write something that would appeal to them? Means what the Rebbe is saying over here is that the fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe went out and wrote his memoirs, seemingly when he could have spent his time better. He could have invested his time in higher level of content. And maybe he could have sat there and figured out what's the best, maybe I could grab this person who has no knowledge and bring them to the content and elevate them to the content. The Rebbe says that's all nice and good when you're talking theories. When someone's drowning, you're trying to have an effect. You try to find anything you can that could grab someone, that you could change someone, that can inspire someone. And if you're going to start writing books and ideas that are not going to enter people's heads, not going to enter people's house and space, they're not interested in paying attention to it, they're not going to click on it. So then you have the things that they are interested in. You have the things that grab them. And in there is going to be enclosed an idea, an inspiration, a way of living, a way of thinking that's going to affect that the person's going to start thinking differently, acting differently, and eventually it's going to bring that person back to Yiddishkeit and Torah mitzvahs. We're not saying that you go and you compromise about Yiddishkeit, about the content of Yiddishkeit. The packaging is different. In the message of the Zechrinus, there's all the content. It's just the content is packaged differently. Behind the limzog is a toichin, the toicha kan kizeh. You pour the content into another pitcher. Like a kankan is a pitcher of wine. When you have a certain person. Maybe the person's going to think, oh, this is just a storybook. Sure, I'll read the Rabbi Yosef Rebbe's memoirs. Not realizing that in it, the content is really there as well to teach the person what it means, the appreciation of Torah mitzvahs, ideas. And then the person's going to realize how the Eibishter is good. That there's something here, and the person's going to is going to continue from that and be affected from that, to learn other things, to behave differently. And this is the reason why the Previous Rebbe wrote his memoirs. He figured that the memoirs is something that people are going to be interested to know. What was the life of the Previous Rebbe? Where does he come from? What's this all about? And that's going to bring a person to be familiar with ideas of Chassidus and the ways of Chassidus and the thinking of Chassidus, and eventually to bring the person and set up their family in a way that's going to be effective, not just as an idea, but it's actually going to penetrate in their behavior and thinking. Maybe the person who's buying it's going to think, oh, this is a nice storybook, I'll put it on the shelf. Madaf is a shelf. יש לסמוך על הכוח של פסקים של יהודי, היידיש עבר שסוף כל סוף יכתרו בו, הדבר מספטים דרנם. The person may think he's just going to read it in an abstract way, or it's just going to sit there. Have faith in a Jewish idea, that the Jewish idea is going to affect the person, and eventually it's going to make the difference. And this is not the Rebbe talking about a theory. The Rebbe, you see it day in, day out. Where people come in very reserved, be very reserved to Yiddishkeit, very reserved to anything godliness. Okay, well, let's just do something small. It could be a Shabbos party, it could be a Fabrengen, it could be a Kiddush, it could be a community park gathering, a barbecue, something that seems that it's not significant, it's not about Yiddishkeit. But eventually, one thing leads to the next. It's that in it, and it's saturated with ideas of Chassidus, and eventually the person gets to the place where that person needs to be when it gets slowly to Torah mitzvahs. When the previous Rebbe saw that it's not enough for him to write it just in the holy tongue. It's only those who are familiar with Lashon HaKodesh. He wrote it in the jargon of the time. You have to remember, 1940s, the population spoke Yiddish, not just the religious population. And that's what we have in other languages, English, etc. There are those who maybe want to stay away from Yiddish. The Rebbe says, fine, not Yiddish, will be something else. Right? I have to go, so I'm going to just do one more paragraph. And we'll see if we'll continue this Fabrengen. If not, everyone can finish it themselves tomorrow night. Tonight, we learned the regular Sicha of Shavua, which is on Parshas B'Shalach. And next week, I think we're going to start a minor again, getting ready for Tu B'Shvat. Maybe something up for it. So the Rebbe says in this Sif, Yesh L'Hoyer, when it comes to feeding the Jewish people when they came to Mitzrayim, it says that Yosef fed them bread according to the taf, according to the children, how they were. A taf is like a young child. You can't feed the same foods, the same bread you're going to feed to an adult. You don't feed that child. The child needs a food that works for them, right? You go to a wedding, you go to an airplane, you have children's meals. You have to feed them something. You can't feed them something that's, God forbid, harmful to them. Even if it looks like bread. This is why at the time, in the 40s, they were concerned that there was educated, non-religious teachers that were teaching the text of the Chumash, and the Previous Rebbe was very against it, because you can't just say, well, they're just teaching the text, they're not saying anything wrong. But there's that in between the lines, there's the tone, there's the periods, there's how you put the sentence together that gives over a message. And Friedrich Rebbe says, no, if the person's not a Yirei Shamayim, the person's not God-fearing, I don't want that person to be a teacher. It's negative someone who was not Shomer Shabbos, someone who wasn't Shabbos observant, should not be teaching. They're just learning the text. They're not making their own short version where they can corrupt the text. They teach the text as is. Just like it says in food, you have to be careful what you feed them physical food. You have to also be careful what you feed spiritual food. What's the big deal? After this teacher comes in for 45 minutes to give the Chumash class, it's not like you see the teacher again, when the teacher is going to have an effect begin to afterwards in recess and start talking to the kids. He only comes in, he teaches his class every day and leaves. Ad lamachar, till tomorrow. Why can't he teach that? Why can't he be a Chumash teacher if he's teaching the text? Because lechem, l'chu lachmo belachmi, when it say you have to eat, the idea is because at the end of the day, it's not kosher bread, it's poison bread. And poison bread is something the Rebbe said no. Yesh Yosef, the Rebbe adds, Hoyer points out, the Rebbe says that, just a side note, that if you think that the Friedrich Rebbe came out against the non-Shabbos observant mechanchim, educators, who were rebbes who were teaching Chumash, Jewish content, not just secular content. Same time, the Friedrich Rebbe didn't give up on these people, because as an individual, this person, the Friedrich Rebbe, tried to bring him back to Yiddishkeit. They didn't want him to be a teacher, not yet. If he becomes Shomer Shabbos, then he can become a teacher. To help them. There are different discussions of not to look to distance this teacher from Yiddishkeit, but also in a way that will bring this person himself closer, but at the same time help this person in their journey, but not that they should be a teacher. The Rebbe continues with this, that we see this is the idea of the Rebbe, which is the Mazar B'chaim. So I just want to finish off this Sicha, because I must go. The Rebbe says like this: the words of the tzaddikim live forever. That the words themselves are alive, and the Rebbe is alive. The teachings and the Rebbes are setting up families and generations of Chassidim. And when you see that's not just the children, when there's grandchildren. You set up students, and now the students are teaching students. This is the requirement, and what's demanded, and what's expected. We have to set up the army of God. That we would all march together with the Rebbe, with the students, with the Talmidim, to Mashiach, with a complete redemption, speedy in our time. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. I think we're going to stop the Fabring in here, and next week we'll start a Maimon. Have a wonderful Shabbos.